My entitled parents absolutely hate my fiancé, despite the fact that he is quite literally a perfect future husband, as they have gone as far as to say that he is absolutely the worst thing to ever happen to me and that I'm going to regret marrying him for the rest of my life. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out point blank, my parents don't like my fiancé. They have made it obvious throughout our whole relationship that they are not big fans of him. We have had this conversation multiple times, but today I have had it. We have been together for 3.5 years and we got engaged this November. In some ways, my parents are traditional. When my boyfriend and I first started dating, I tried to look for someone I really thought that they would like because that really mattered to me. They wanted me to be with someone who was educated, had a good job, from a nice family, and shared the same religion and culture. I really valued that because I also wanted the same for most of those. He checked all my boxes and then some. I admire how strong of a work ethic he has and how when he has goals for himself, he works towards them 100% to make it happen. But on the other hand, he is so gentle with me and loving. He supports my dreams. He makes sure that he does whatever it takes so that I am happy. We work so well together. We have the same sense of humor, and in general, we are truly best friends. I thought my parents would love him because of all of this too, but I was completely wrong. They quickly found things they disliked about him. We live an hour away from each other, and he lives in the city, so we hang out there often because there is more to do. And they just hated that I drove to his house. They thought it was very disrespectful to me that he would want me to drive there, and instead, he should pick me up and drive me back to his house and then bring me back home that same night because we don't do sleepovers. I told them that was unrealistic as we would lose time on driving. If we lived closer together, he would pick me up, but he works until 6 p.m. most days, so I come to his place right around then so we can then have more time to hang out. If he had to pick me up, we wouldn't get to his place until about 8 or 9 p.m., but they didn't care about the logistics, only that he's not a gentleman. He takes us on date nights with dinner and an activity weekly and buys me flowers multiple times a month. He opens the car door for me always. He cooks for us. He is kind with his words when I'm feeling down. So to me, he is a gentleman. He has a 9-to-5 job that is well paid. He is also a landlord and likes to flip properties on the side. He has a couple of 6-unit buildings and a few single units in the building he lives in. He has goals of retiring early and he doesn't believe a 9-to-5 will get him there. He does have loans that he had to take out for some of these, but a few of them are almost paid off and others will be paid off in years to come. So basically the snowball effect. Sometimes these properties need repairs done as they are not all brand new. Furnace problems, pipe leak, etc. And he pays for these repairs from the extra money he gets from rent. And he is really doing well with this, I have to say. But my parents hate this. They say I will never be able to live a normal life with him being up to his neck in loans. They say he will bankrupt us and we will never be able to afford nice things or vacations or raising children because he is wasting money on buying properties. No matter how many times I explain how they will be paid off or anything else, they just simply don't care. This one, I guess I can understand where they might be coming from because I get that landlords often are not well liked. And while I won't be getting into that, I also get why my parents might be apprehensive about this. I was on the edge at first too before he went through it all with me. Investing is not for everyone. It is risky, but that's why you have accountants and other professionals to help you make smart moves. We have to go through our finances. We made a budget and we will always be able to live a comfortable life and still enjoy the things that we love to do. Now today, this is where I was truly annoyed. My mom said that she can't stand the sight of him, and every time she sees him, she gets on edge because of how much she thinks he is wrong for me. She said she hates the way he treats me, and I was so confused by this. He has never treated me badly. Truly, I have never even seen him upset or mad. He has never raised his voice at me, so truly, I was so confused. She said he makes too many jokes and messes with me too much, but I just want to reiterate, we have the same sense of humor. We like to joke with each other and mess around. This is how I show my love, and he is the same. We have plenty of normal adult conversations, but we do have fun and joke with each other. My mom said this is unacceptable, and he must act like an adult and be obsessed with me. She said it's an embarrassment, and if anyone heard it, they would feel bad for me. But this is just so dramatic. I understand being blind to things because you are in love, but this is just not the case. If anything, I'm worse than him. I make more jokes than he does. He's never said anything actually mean to me. I've never been hurt by anything he has said. To me, it is the reason I love our relationship and I love him. It is my favorite part of our relationship, to be honest. But she doesn't care about what I like, only that she doesn't. To make things even more confusing, my parents' relationship is literally this as well. Our whole family is like this. We all joke with each other all the time. I also have to add that she in general is upset that I'm getting married. She is scared to lose me and says she will not make it when I leave leave. Instead of being happy for me, she is acting like I'm dying. But seriously, I will only be an hour away, and I'm still going to visit every week if I can. I would look at their points all objectively if I didn't realize a few years ago that they are kind of helicopter parents. Not fully, but some aspects of it. This is something that I slowly started realizing when I started college. I realized that I found it very difficult to make my own decisions without feeling like I need to consult them first. I needed approval for everything. I had a huge fear of disappointing them, and I still do to an extent, but I'm working on it and learning to be my own person as I am an adult. Whenever I try to make my own decisions, it doesn't necessarily turn out the best, and they use it against me and say that's why I should have consulted them first. But mistakes are how you learn. That's life. I can't ask them for their opinion about every single decision I make for the rest of my life. That is seriously not healthy. There are some other things I've started realizing too, but for now I'll leave it there. I will say that I know they probably don't realize they're like this, and they think they're just being protective parents with my best interest, but instead it has negatively impacted me in many ways. So seriously, how do I handle this situation? It is making me lose the excitement of being engaged and planning a wedding. I want them to be happy for me, and they're just not. They fake it most of the time, and I will think that maybe they finally have started to like him, but then days like today happen, and I realize that absolutely no progress has been made. In fact, I think it is maybe even worse after today. I truly don't understand what they want from him. He has gone out of his way our whole relationship to bond with them. He brings my mom treats and flowers. He hangs out with my dad, even making plans with just the two of them to bond more. And I do feel bad, but I know it's all fake on their end, because they would never say any of this to his face. So honestly, am I overreacting? Am I blind in love and I don't notice these things? Or are they just being dramatic? Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, I think based on what you've described, you literally have like the perfect fiance. This guy runs his own business, he's successful, he's driven, he loves you, he's respectful to your parents. Like, this guy checks all the boxes. So it's like, wait a second, why don't your parents like him? Because in my opinion, it kind of seems like because you're moving away, they automatically don't like him at all. Like, that's what this might be all about in my opinion, because everything you've described doesn't sound like a bad fiance. And it really seems like you could be married to anybody and they would still find fault to be like, wow, I don't like him. So from my perspective, I don't think you're overreacting at all. I think you have a good partner in life, and it seems like you guys have a good plan in front of you. So the fact that your parents don't see this perfect future husband that you're gonna marry, in my opinion, is truly tragic, and that is something they're gonna have to work through. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My toxic relative basically robs me of my entire inheritance after my dad passes away, as they literally worked around the clock to make sure they would get as much stuff away from me as possible. Here's what happened. So my dad had a stroke back in February of 2022. My older brother and I rushed him to the hospital immediately. We then immediately started calling family members, as my dad was 79 at the time. His two brothers, who we will call Charlie and Connor, didn't even ask about what happened or what my dad's condition was upon hearing about the stroke. They just wanted to know where dad's will was, especially Connor, because he demanded that we find the will and get it in his hands as soon as possible. After transferring dad to another more advanced facility, it was eventually determined that dad would be confined to a bed for the rest of his life, and that he would be nonverbal and might be able to recognize those closest to him. Dad had made his desires in this matter quite clear. He didn't want to live like that after my mom suffered a similar fate. So with heavy hearts, my older brother and I made the decision to discontinue life support, and my dad passed away the following month. At the continued demand of our uncles, we searched for my dad's will and couldn't find it following a thorough search of dad's house. But eventually one day the will turned up, and it was haphazardly atop a stack of paperwork that we had already searched. The will listed our uncle Charlie as the executor. The key parts of the will was how my dad's business was divided. Charlie would get 60%, my older brother would get 20%, and my younger brother and I would get 10% each. Additionally, Charlie would get my deceased uncle's antique Chrysler, as well as my dad's 57 Chevy race car for the rest of his life, where it will be returned to my brother and I after his passing. My dad's house was initially supposed to go to my older brother's ex-girlfriend and daughter. However, for reasons I'm not sure of, my dad changed the will to have the house sold and the proceeds be split between my brothers and myself. Now, Charlie's first act as executor was to consolidate all of dad's accounts into an estate account, dismiss the employees, and shut my brother and I out of the business. Charlie continued to run the business solo for about a month and paid himself out of the estate account until he eventually shut the business down entirely and requested the presence of my brother and I for a meeting. In this meeting, he offered to relinquish his 60% life interest in exchange for complete complete ownership of the aforementioned vehicles so that he could pass it on to his kids. Initially, we agreed to this, well, until we saw the agreement that they had their attorney draft. In this agreement, there was an indemnity clause that states we couldn't hold him responsible for anything he has done, is doing, or will do as the executor, including breaching the agreement. We attempted to negotiate the terms of the contract, but he refused further negotiation. After some time, he began selling estate assets to pay for debts, including a parcel for real estate that we thought might be sold for far less than what it was worth. Well, Charlie refused to discuss it and proceeded anyways. My brothers and I requested assistance from an attorney to figure out what our other options are. We eventually brought the estate into litigation, including filing to protect the real estate. Charlie sought representation through a large law firm and had 3 attorneys assigned to the case. Ultimately, we couldn't do anything and had to let a lot of things go. The assets for the business were sold off for chump change. Charlie purchased the 2 vehicles directly off of the estate, even though the sale of these assets were never announced. Eventually, it got to the point where the only major property that was left was real estate. There were 4 properties in total, and 3 of them were occupied by people, and the law firm was eyeing one of the occupied properties to sell first. In order to save the properties, I offered to buy my dad's house from the estate in order to settle the estate, and this was initially about $50,000. After we signed the initial agreement, it went before a judge where it had been in litigation to okay the agreement. But that's where my brother's ex-girlfriend objected to it, even though she never showed up to prior court-ordered mediation, and so because of that, we went right back to mediation. And of course, I have to pay for round 2 of this mediation. The judge appointed a guardian for the minor, and they ultimately demanded $10,000 for the minor to be placed in a trust account until she turns 18, and the ex-girlfriend wanted $3,000. So that got tacked onto my mortgage. And so it all just went back and forth, and it honestly cost me so much money. Eventually, I finally closed on my house, but my God, I kind of feel used. My older brother and my wife are the only ones that have been consistently sticking by me on this, as everyone else has just disappeared, and I'm honestly so disappointed by how everything went down. Oh man, this story sucks for so many reasons. People can change overnight the second any money's involved in some kind of like estate settlement thing. Like seriously, this is so unfair the way Charlie treated you. Like you did not deserve that in the slightest. So hopefully you're able to move forward from this, because being stuck in situations like this, especially with family members, in my opinion, is absolutely the worst. Am I the jerk for asking my roommates why they didn't ask me to move out with them? Because right now I feel incredibly left out, and at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I've lived with my 3 other roommates for the last 2 years. One of my roommates, who we will call Amy, has not been the best roommate this year. She had not treated her cat very well, where she was underfeeding due to the cost of the food, and leaving her alone for days at a time to stay with her boyfriend, and thus making the animal incredibly anxious. Amy also had not been great at cleaning. We all have an agreement on rotation for who's cleaning, and she consistently either cleaned hers late or would only halfway clean it and then ticked it off anyways. When brought up to Amy, she would say that she was stressed, but she would do her best in the future, but it never really resolved itself. My second roommate by the name of Sarah was the most irritated by this behavior, with my third roommate, who we will call Mary, being very unimpressed by the entire situation. 2 days ago, Sarah called a house meeting where Sarah and Mary informed both Amy and I that they had decided to move out and they would be leaving at the end of the lease in February. And to be completely honest, I am upset. Less due to the fact that they're leaving, I mean that is their right, but it really comes down to the fact that I was being left with Amy. She cannot afford to live without me. However, I would prefer to move out on my own under the circumstances. I've already spoken to Amy that this is what I would prefer, and I honestly feel awful. I told Sarah and Mary how hurt I was for not having a heads up, but both of them said they had wished to wait until they were fully decided and that this was the best for their mental health to leave. Now, where I think I was the jerk was when I privately messaged them, asking specifically why they didn't ask me. I mean, I can only assume they have a problem with me as well. I brought up the fact that I paid the bond outright without argument because none of them can, and that this feels like I've been stabbed in the back. I feel like a total jerk, but I also feel like they were a jerk first. Then, a day later, I told them, in the same chat that they did not reply in, that I would not like to speak to them for the time being, just so I don't say anything else that I might regret. My other friend thinks that if this is what's best for Sarah and Mary, then as their friend, I should support them. But my friends at work, however, think that Sarah and Mary were complete jerks. I have plans of moving out as soon as I get a lease. I will, of course, pay rent to the share house until our lease is up, but I plan on taking all my stuff with me, and I only own the TV and the fridge as it is. My friends have stated that taking the communal used fridge would be me being the jerk again, as all 3 of them will be without access to a personal fridge, but I would prefer to move as soon as possible. So am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now I seriously don't know what to do. No, you're not the jerk at all. This is so weird. First of all, I would not feel bad about leaving Amy high and dry because she does not sound like a good roommate. I get that you guys are like somewhat friends, but at this point, you really need to look out for yourself. Sarah and Mary are clearly doing their own thing, so why should you be stuck living with someone you obviously don't want to live with? And when it comes to the TV and the fridge, guess what? That's your property. If they don't like the fact that they're not going to have a fridge, then they can buy their own and have something that they can use. Like, I'm really not sure why you're getting so bent out of shape over this. They've clearly made their decision, so go ahead and make yours. Because at the end of the day, you deserve to have a good place to live that doesn't have toxic roommates. And from the sounds of it, all three of these women absolutely fit the bill. My entitled friend made my brother and I spend close to $200 on food and drinks, whereas she only spent $7. And even though she paid me back eventually after I begged her to do so, I now feel very used by my friend. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my friend and I only live 20 minutes away from each other, but we also come from very different socioeconomic backgrounds. She comes from a not so well-off family, whereas I come from an upper middle-class family. I'm telling you this because I think she believes it's okay to mooch off my brother and I since we're so well off. However, I work a minimum wage job and so does my brother. Our parents are rich, but we are not. I've told my friend a few times already that I have to pay for all my gas and electric bills. I may not have to work about a place to stay, but any bills and spending money is all on me. Because her house is not so nice, she always comes over to my house, and I honestly don't mind. However, since she currently doesn't have a job, she'll want to stay for 8 to 9 hours at a time. I work and go to school, so I'm a very busy girl. A few nights ago, my brother and I went to a bar, and she wanted to get fries. And I wanted to tell her no, since bar food is expensive, but I chose not to. After all, she would pay her share of it, right? Well, the tab ended up being $100, and she didn't offer to pay for any of it. We then got boba right after, and it would have been a great opportunity for her to buy me and my brother some boba, but of course she only bought herself some. We then got food a little while after that as it was planned, and it ended up being about $50 for all of our food. And guess what? I paid for all of that. She said she was going to send me her half, but she never did. So I told her the day after to send it to me, and she did. My brother and I spent close to $200 that night, and if I hadn't told her to give me her share, she would have only paid like $7 for her boba. So at this point, I really feel used by my friend, and I now don't know what to do. Oh man, this is kind of crappy, and I can completely understand you feeling kind of jaded about this. Like seriously, your friend really should have stepped up and paid for her share at the bar. And sure, she paid for it after the fact, but I think setting some clear boundaries would really do some good in the future, because the way your friend acted was super selfish, and you and your brother did not deserve that in the slightest. My boss really puts the micro in micromanagement, as he is quite literally one of the worst people to ever work for. Here's what happened. Okay, so I think we've all had that type of manager that I'm going to describe. That one type of manager who would take corporate policy way too literally, or who would let huge things slide, but little things would get you yelled at, or the ones that would somehow insist on being part of a 30-second process that turns into a 5-minute task when they help. But my manager, who we will call John, this guy literally put the micro in micromanager. To his credit, he was a pretty good manager overall, meaning that he had a solid work ethic. But he was one of those that always acted laid back and friendly with the guests, but was on us for every little thing. If you would show up 10 minutes early all month, he would never notice. But if you were 2 minutes late, you would get passive-aggressive comments about how traffic didn't seem that bad when he was coming in. And just to be clear, we were all casual dining, but his one thing he was awful about was your table being perfectly cleaned at the end of your shift. Now, of course, a clean section is important, but this one habit of his truly made me think this guy needed to spend some time in therapy. Normally, your closer or shift lead wanted to check your section before you left, but if John was on, it had to be him. He would feel along every surface. He would literally get on his knees to check under the table. He would count to make sure you had the exact number of sugar, sweet and low, and Splenda packets available for customers. But the thing I will never forget was the salt and pepper shakers. He would pull out a ruler and measure. There had to be exactly 1 millimeter of open space between the metal part of the shaker and the rest. If there was too much or too little, he would make you change it. Like literally, he would make you go back and get like 1/10 of a spoon of salt and add it to your shaker. He would turn what normally took 30 seconds to do into a 10-minute project. And just to be clear, none of this was from the general manager or corporate policy. This was the hill that he decided to die on. I will never understand it. I'd be willing to bet my entire bank account that no customer in the history of restaurant history has ever complained or even considered their salt shaker being too low. Because honestly, honestly, the way this guy acted was super annoying. Okay, this story really strikes a chord with me because seriously, I can't stand managers who act this way. I've dealt with micromanagers many times in my past and they are always awful. They never help the situation get resolved, and if anything, everything just comes to a screeching halt, especially when it comes to something that you definitely know how to do. Like that for me is the worst part about micromanagers, because you literally know how to do this, but they're inserting their stupid opinion and it makes it impossible to do anything. So the fact that this guy was literally measuring salt and pepper shakers, as well as meticulously looking around your section, making sure it's perfect and that everything's exactly the way he wants it. Like that is so weird and so obnoxious. If I was in your shoes, I would get super pissed off as well, because clearly you know what you're doing. And the fact that he's getting so weird about stuff like this, in my opinion, is incredibly annoying. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.